Hi and Assalamualaikum semua. Today we will continue chapter 7, which is security management models. In this chapter you will learn about the various security management models, including access control models and security architecture model. So let's get started. These are the things that will be covered in this chapter. First, we will look at introduction to blueprint, framework and security models. Next, security management models. Next, security architecture models. And then access control models, and lastly academic access control models. Now let's go to the first subtopic, which is introduction to blueprints, frameworks and security models. When we talk about information security model, it is a standard that used for reference or comparison and often serve as the stepping off point for emulation and adoption. Basically, all organizations need to decide which type of security management model that they need to implement at their organization. One way to select a methodology is to adapt or adopt an existing security management model or set of practices. Adapt and adopt kat sini maksudnya dia boleh pakai security management model yang dah sedia ada, yang dah diguna pakai di company lain dan dah terbukti keberkesanan security management models tersebut, dan dia adapt kepada company dia sendiri. Because each InfoSec environment is unique, you may need to modify or adapt portions of several frameworks. Means that if you adapt the models from other company, you might modify ataupun customize ikut keperluan you punya company. So what works well for one organization may not precisely fit another. That's why dia ada term customizable supaya disesuai dengan keperluan company. The company must design a working security plan and then implement a management model to execute and maintain that plan. Why? Because as you all know, information security is very important in all of the organization. So that's why they need to identify what is the best model that they can use. Company can begin with the creation or validation of a security framework. Create dulu framework of the security management model. And then you develop the InfoSec blueprint. You come up with the documentation of the security management model, which describe existing controls and identifies other necessary security controls. In other words, contoh yang paling senang bila kita cakap pasal framework. Contoh kalau you nak buat rumah. Sebelum you buat rumah, you kena ada plan rumah dulu. Plan rumah tu adalah framework kepada you punya models. Most organizations draw on established security frameworks, models and practices to generate a usable security blueprint. So dia hanya guna pakai saja model yang sudah terbukti berfungsi dengan baik. Another way to create a blueprint is to look at the path taken by other organizations, by observe other organization punya model macam mana. Is it effective? Is it successful to the organisation? Kalau okay, so semua orang akan adapt ataupun guna pakai dia punya blueprint. In this kind of benchmarking, so this concept dipanggil benchmarking. Okay, you follow the recommended practices or industry standards. Basically, benchmarking involves two types of benchmarking, which is internal benchmarking and also external benchmarking. Internal benchmarking involve comparing organizational performance at some defined state against current or expected performance, whereas external benchmarking involve comparing one's organizational results against other similar organization. So kat sini kita boleh nampak internal benchmarking tu maksudnya you compare performance tu within the organization itself, whereas the external benchmarking pula you compare result dari dua company ataupun organisation yang berbeza. Now let's look at the security management models. Basically, there are a lot of security management models yang ada, tapi kita fokus only on this one, which is the ISO 27000 series. Sebab apa? Sebab this is the most widely referenced and often discussed security models. Yang lain tu ada juga yang guna, tapi yang paling famous adalah ISO 27000 series. The purpose of these models is to offer guidance for the management of InfoSec to individuals responsible for their organization's security programs. Maksudnya, kalau ada siapa-siapa company yang nak develop security management model ni, the best way is to follow the ISO 27000 series. This security model start with ISO 27000 series and then dia beranak pula kepada ISO IEC 27002, which is focused on a broad overview of the various areas of security, providing information on 127 controls over 10 selected areas. The next type of this security management model is ISO IEC 27001, which provides information on how to implement ISO IEC 27002 and how to set up an information security management system ISMS. And these security management models use SANS score, which is a Security Consensus Operational Readiness Evaluation Audit Checklist, which is to determine how closely an organisation is complying with ISO 27002. So kalau organisation dia nak develop the security management models dekat dalam dia punya organisation, first they need to use this audit checklist dulu. So audit checklist ni akan membantu dia mengenal pasti apa yang ada dan apa yang tak ada dekat dalam dia punya organisation in order for them to set up the security management models. So yang ini you boleh refer dekat table 8-1 dalam full text page 415. This is the major process steps that need to be taken if you want to create ISO 27001 security management models at the organisation. And the organisation memang dia kena ikut step by step semua keperluan yang disenaraikan. Kalau dia tak dapat penuhi setiap keperluan ni, dia memang tidak akan dapat certification of the security management models tu. Okay, this is the ISO 27000 series current and planned standards. Maksudnya dia ada banyak standard dekat sini. Sebab apa? Sebab dia nak memenuhi setiap jenis organisation yang ada dekat dalam industri. So setiap industri kan ada banyak, ada macam-macam function. That's why dalam ISO 27000 ni dia ada pecahan pula ikut fokus masing-masing dalam organisation. Next is security architecture models. Security architecture models illustrate InfoSec implementations and can help organizations to quickly make improvements through adaptation. So bila ada security architecture models ni, ia membantu the organization to see a clear picture how the security management model will become. Some models implemented into computer hardware and software, some implemented as policy and practices, and some are implemented in both. Both ni maksudnya dia implement dalam computer hardware and software dan juga policy and practices to the organisation. And some models focus on the confidentiality of information, while other focus on the integrity of the information as it is being processed. So yang pentingnya, keutamaan dia adalah untuk menjaga information tu dari tersebar kepada pihak ketiga yang tidak bertanggungjawab. Okay, now let's look at the types of security architecture models. The first one is TCSEC, Trusted Computer System Evaluation Criteria. TCSEC defines the criteria for assessing the access control in a computer system. This type of security architecture models is part of a larger series called Rainbow Series. Why they call Rainbow Series? Because the color coding used to uniquely identify each document. So, dia coding ikut warna yang berbeza untuk identify each of the document listed. This security architecture models, also known as the Orange Book, these security architecture models has been replaced by the new type of architecture model called Common Criteria. Now let's look at TCB, Trusted Computing Base. Sebenarnya TCSEC dan Trusted Computer Base ni adalah dalam kategori security architecture models yang sama. Cuma perbezaan dia ada daripada certain elements yang ada pada TCSEC tak ada pada TCB. TCSEC defines a trusted computing base as the combination of all hardware, firmware, and software responsible for enforcing the security policy. Another type of TCB is a reference monitor. The function of reference monitor is to mediate access to objects by subject. Lebih senang untuk monitor sebab dia by subject. System administrator must be able to audit or periodically review the reference monitor to ensure it is functioning effectively without unauthorized modification. That's why for the security architecture model, monitoring is very important. Dia kena monitor 24 hours, 7 days a week, because kita tak tahu kadang-kadang during the certain period tu ada hackers yang boleh access into the system. And one of the biggest challenges in TCB is the existence of convert channels. When we talk about convert channel, for example, some researchers discover that the indicator lights blinking on the face of some network routers were flashing in sync with the content of the data bits being transmitted, thus unintentionally displaying the contents of the data. Another type of security architecture models is ITSEC. ITSEC is Information Technology System Evaluation Criteria. ITSEC is very similar to TCSEC to compare detailed security function specifications and result in an assessment of systems functionality and comprehensive penetration testing. Sama macam TCSEC, ITSEC juga diganti dengan Common Criteria. Okay, now let's look at the Common Criteria. It is an international standard for computer security certification. Basically, an organisation kalau dia nak dapatkan computer security certification, dia kena ikut standard Common Criteria. Common Criteria considered as successor to TCSEC and ITSEC because it reconciles some of the differences between the various other standards. Now, let's look at access control models. Access controls regulate the admission of users into trusted areas of the organisation. It means that the logical access to the information system or the physical access to the organisation's facility. Dalam arti kata lain, access control ni adalah dia menghadkan bukan semua pekerja ataupun staff boleh access into the system ataupun physical area supaya dapat meminimizkan threats kepada information security. Access control is maintained by means of collection of policies, programs to carry out those policies, and technologies that enforce policies. Basically, when we talk about access control models, the general application of access control comprise 4 processes, which is identification, authentication, authorization, and also accountability. Identification means that obtaining the identity of the entity requesting access to a logical or physical area. Authentication means that you confirm the identity of the entity seeking access to a logical or physical area. Meanwhile, authorization means that you determine which actions an authenticated entity can perform in that physical or logical area. And lastly, accountability, it means that you documenting the activities of the authorized individuals and system. Documenting is very important in case in future ada berlakunya masalah, ada security breach of information. Contohnya, dia boleh refer balik dari report yang dah disimpan. Report ataupun log lah keluar masuk pekerja yang access to the information ataupun physical area. Access control is built on several key principles, which is least privilege. Members of the organisation can access minimum amount of information for the minimum amount of time necessary to perform their required duties. Maksudnya, dia hanya boleh akses untuk maklumat yang paling asas sahaja dalam organisation. The second principle is need to know. It means that the access control limits a user's access to the specific information required to perform the currently assigned task. Third principle of access control model is separation of duties. It is a control requiring that significant tasks be split up in such a way that more than one individual is responsible for their completion. Basically, those who have higher ranking position have a lot more access to the system of organisation or the physical area compared to support staff. Okay, this is the category of access control. Basically, categories of access control boleh terbagi pada 3, which is first approach, second approach, and third approach. Yang first approach ni is based on inherent characteristic. It can refers to directive, deterrent, preventative, detective, corrective, recovery, and also compensating. Whereas the second approach of asset control is based on operational impact. It means that it looks at the three categorized control based on their operational impact on the organization, which is they look on the management, operational, and also technical level. The third approach of access control category is based on degree of authority. One of the method used is mandatory access controls or MACs. MAC is structured and coordinated within a data classification scheme that rates each collection of information as well as each user. So these ratings are often referred to as sensitivity level or classification levels. For example, in the US government and military, an individual with secret security clearance can view secret and confidential classified materials, subject to need to know, but cannot view top secret material. So kat sini kita nampak lagi tinggi level of confidentiality, lagi kurang staff ataupun person yang boleh akses kepada information tersebut. Okay, dekat sini kita dari MAC tadi kita dapat identify the data classification models. Okay, for example, US government uses 3-level classification scheme for information deemed to be national security information. Contohnya, yang paling tinggi adalah top secret information, second is secret information, the third one is confidential. Kalau dalam organisation pula, dia boleh labelkan sama ada information tu untuk public view or for official or internal use only, and also confidential or sensitive. Maksudnya kalau untuk public ni dia boleh view kepada semua orang. Orang luar pun boleh juga view ataupun access kepada information tu. For official or internal ni maksudnya within the organisation itself, hanya untuk staff dalam organisation tu sahaja. Dan confidential pula boleh diakses untuk beberapa orang yang telah disenaraikan sahaja. Tak semua boleh access into the information. Next, security clearance. Each user of an information asset is assigned an authorization level that identifies the level of information classification he or she can access. Selalunya authorization level ni boleh diberi ikut kepada you punya level of job ataupun kepentingan di dalam organisation tu. So most organizations have developed rules and corresponding security clearance, so the individuals are assigned into authorization level correlating with the classifications of the information assets. Next is managing classified information assets. Managing an information asset includes all aspects of its life cycle, from specification to design, acquisition, implementation, use, storage, distribution, backup, recovery, retirement, and destruction. An information asset that has a classification designation other than unclassified or public must be clearly marked as such with a cover page and headers and footers. To maintain the confidentiality of classified documents, managers can implement a clean desk policy. Clean desk policy means that requiring employees to secure all information in an appropriate storage container at the end of each business day. Maksudnya tiap-tiap hari dia kena buang information tu, cleankan dia punya dustbin contohnya. When copies of classified information are no longer valuable or too many copies exist, care should be taken to destroy them properly to discourage dumpster diving. Dumpster diving adalah an information attack that involves searching through a target organization's trash and recycling bins for sensitive information. Selalunya berlaku bila kita dah buang dokumen penting dan orang yang mempunyai niat yang tak baik ni, dia akan korek balik information yang kita dah buang tu, sama ada dalam tong sampah ke ataupun dalam dustbin komputer ke. So that's why you kena clearkan apa yang you nak buang. That's why kena guna paper shredding machine untuk elakkan daripada berlakunya masalah dumpster diving. So this is the example of US government data classification cover sheets. The top secret, secret, confidential, and for official use only. So dalam dia punya information, dia kena letak cover dokumen kat depan sekali macam ni supaya orang boleh faham level of access control yang disenaraikan dokumen tersebut. Next access control model is lattice-based access controls. This type of access controls assign user a matrix of authorization for particular areas of access. The level of authorization may vary depending on the classification authorizations that individuals possess for each group of information assets or resources. And then there is also non-discretionary controls dalam access control models, and then there are discretionary access control DACs. Other form of access control is content-dependent access control. Yang ini fokus on access to a specific set of information. It can be dependent on its content. Contoh marketing information khas untuk marketing department sahaja. Constrained user interfaces. Some systems are designed specifically to restrict what information an individual user can access. For example, like ATMs. And another form of access control is temporal, time-based isolation. Access to information is limited by a time of day constraint. Maksudnya ada had masa untuk access. Okay, the last subtopic of this chapter is academic access control models. A number of access control models were initially designed to teach system designers to build operating system with security built in by controlling the confidentiality or integrity of data within the software. Some of these were built into actual OS, but most were used simply to better understand how systems should or could function. So basically, academic access control model, there are 6 types of academic access control model, which is the Bell-LaPadula confidential model, BIBA integrity model, Clark-Wilson integrity model, Graham-Denning access control model, Harrison-Razzo-Ullman model, and also Brewer-Nash Chinese wall. Bell-LaPadula confidential model, state machine reference model that helps ensure the confidentiality of an information system by means of mandatory access control, data classification, and security clearance. BIBA integrated model, similar to Bell-LaPadula, the function of this access control model is to provide access control to ensure that subjects cannot have less integrity as a result of read or write operations. The Clark-Wilson integrity model, which is built upon principle of change control rather than integrity level, was designed for the commercial environment. Basically, CWI model controls subject authentication and identification, access to object by means of well-formed transaction, and also execution by subjects on a restricted set of programs. These are the elements of the Clark-Wilson model: constrained data item, unconstrained data item, integrity verification procedure, and also transformation procedure. Another type of academic access control models is Graham-Denning access control model. It has 3 parts, which is a set of objects, a set of subjects, and a set of rights. Next is Harrison-Razzo-Ullman model. HRU model defines a method to allow changes to access rights and the addition and removal of subjects and objects, a process that the Bell-LaPadula model does not have. Maksudnya, HRU model ni adalah improvement daripada Bell-LaPadula. And the last type of academic access control model is Brewer-Nash, or they call it as Chinese wall. This type of access control model designed to prevent a conflict of interest between 2 parties. So that's the end of chapter 7. I hope that each one of you can understand the concept of security management models and understand that in order for an organization to create a good security management program, they need to select the best security management model for the organization. So I see you guys on next topic. Thank you so much. Take care and Assalamualaikum.